Good morning. Welcome to ASU Care. My name is Tracy Mason. I'm the general manager here, and greeting you this morning puts a smile on my face. I'm so happy to see you all here. Thanks for finding us, those of you who had a difficult time finding us. We appreciate that. Now, please tell your friends how to find us. We need that awareness. We are working on that awareness. We are working on our visibility. We are going through a marketing rebrand right now. You're going to start seeing some very exciting marketing materials going out that we're very proud of and very excited to get the word out about who we are and what we do here at ASU Care. And we need your help. We always need your help with that. We're glad to be able to keep these Tuesday morning music and teas and our Coffee at Care programs. We also have our featured artist season, and we also have plenty of ticketed rental shows for you to come see as well. We would love for you to check it out. You can find all of that on asucare.com, asukerr.com. And also think about using us for a rental for a birthday party or a bar mitzvah or a wedding. We do wonderful work with that. We have an amazing staff for all of those kinds of things too. We are really pleased to bring you a very special program this morning through the ASU School of Music program that we have. And we would like at this time to turn the mic over to Ms. Hannah Creviston.
I'm much shorter than everybody. Can you hear me okay if I stand here? Great. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, everybody here at the Care Center. And then especially to all of you. I'm going to lower this, and then Amanda will have to raise it back up. We first did this program a few months ago, or several months ago, on Yom HaShoah at the East Valley JCC. Yom HaShoah is the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Tonight starts Kol Nidre, the most sacred night of the Jewish year, starting Yom Kippur. And I was trying to think of some corollary or parallel that I could draw. All that I came up with was that, you know, even when we look around at the world and see all of the horrible things going on with music and art, and Amanda added faith to my list. Thank you, Amanda. We can prevail over all of the horrible things that are going on, and we hope to keep the legacy of the people killed in the Holocaust alive through programs like this. So thank you very much for being here. I started this project, I guess, a few years ago. I went to hear Eva Schloss speak at the Chandler Center for the Arts. Eva Schloss is a Holocaust survivor. Her mother actually married Anne Frank's father after the Holocaust, so she's the posthumous stepsister of Anne Frank. Eva has several books out. You can read about her amazing story of how she survived the atrocities of the Holocaust. But one of the things that she said that kind of stuck in my head was talking about her brother, who was a painter. He was killed in the Holocaust, but she was able to find some of his paintings hid in one of the hiding places where they were before the concentration camp. She recalled hearing him ask their father what happens to people when they die. And her father's response was, well, they live on through their children. And her brother said, well, what if they die and they don't have any children? And he said, well, the legacy continues through their actions, their works, the things that they've done. And that, for some reason, that really stuck with me that day. And I started thinking of, what can I do to keep the legacy alive and bring life to those who were killed in the Holocaust as a pianist, as a music teacher. And so the first program, and what's hopefully a series, I did was a solo piano lecture recital of works by four composers who were killed in the Holocaust and one composer who survived the Holocaust. So then I wanted to make the second series, and I asked my husband and our dear friend and colleague Amanda DeMaris to collaborate with me, and so that's how this program was born. The first half of our program, I'm going to turn this just a little bit so I can, maybe I'll hold it. Is that better? Okay. The first half of our program features works by Czech composer and pianist Erwin Schulhoff. And Mitchell, if you don't mind going, there we go. You can see some pictures there. Schulhoff here with his daughter, and then a bust of him that stands outside the concentration camp. Schulhoff was born in 1894 in Prague to a wealthy Jewish wool merchant family. His great-uncle, Julius Schulhoff, was a pianist and composer as well. When Schulhoff was 7, his mother used her various connections and convinced Antonin Dvorak, whose name you might recognize, to meet with her son. The story goes that he met with Erwin, heard him play, was very impressed, patted him on the head, gave him a couple chocolates, and said, "Why don't you go study with another teacher?" So he began studying at the Prague Conservatory, where he studied until 1906. Later, he studied in Vienna, Leipzig, and Cologne. His early works were influenced by Richard Strauss and Claude Debussy, with whom Schulhoff studied briefly. The two of them did not get along very well, and so that was a very short period in Schulhoff's life. When World War I broke out, Schulhoff was drafted into the Austro-Hungarian army. He received some shrapnel through his hand and was released from the army. Clearly that hampered his career as a pianist. He became depressed and was kind of fighting with depression. He was in an Italian prisoner of war camp when the war ended. In 1919, when he was released, he moved to Dresden, Germany, where his sister was living. He began studying painting there and met many important artists, dancers, musicians, including Arnold Schoenberg, Alban Berg, and Anton Webern, again, names you might recognize. He began a concert series to promote the works of these three and works of his own, as well as some other contemporaries. He also met George Grosz at this time, who was an influential Dadaist. And in 1921, he moved to Berlin to live near Grosz and to try to create musical counterparts to the Dada movement that was happening in art. In organizing a concert which included Alban Berg's opera Wozzeck, Schulhoff wrote, "Absolute art is revolution. It requires additional facets for development, leads to overthrow in order to open new paths, and is the most powerful in music. The idea of revolution in art has evolved for decades. Under whatever sun the creators live, in that for them, art is the commonality of man. This is particularly true in music because this art form is the liveliest, and as a result reflects the revolution most strongly and deeply, the complete escape from imperialistic tonality and rhythm, the climb to an ecstatic change for the better." During this time, he wrote, I'll show you a score. You can go ahead and flip to the next slide, Mitchell, thank you. He wrote 5 short character pieces for piano and dedicated them to George Grosz. How many of you have heard of John Cage? Yes? How many of you are, we're not going to play any John Cage. How many of you are familiar with his work 4:33, 4 minutes and 33 seconds? This is one that we learn about in music history as being this groundbreaking work where it's just 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. And we could do a whole lecture on that and the idea that whatever you listen to is music depending on how you hear it. But again, we learn about John Cage and that piece. This is a piece that Schulhoff wrote 33 years earlier. You see very complicated notation. Who can perform that for me right now? It's just silence. It's all rests. Very, very heavily notated, but all rests. George Grosz also introduced Schulhoff to American ragtime, dance music, and jazz. And while on a concert tour, Schulhoff wrote in a letter to Alban Berg, "I am boundlessly fond of nightclub dancing, so much so that I have periods during which I spend whole nights dancing with one hostess or another, out of pure enjoyment of the rhythm, and with my subconscious filled with sensual delight. Thereby, I acquire phenomenal inspiration for my work, as my conscious mind is incredibly earthly, even animal, as it were." Schulhoff began to abandon the atonal expressionism of the Schoenberg circle and began to be more influenced by jazz, French neoclassicism, and Slavonic folk music. He also moved back to Prague at this time, where he was active as a composer, concert pianist, and music critic. I think Amanda and Christopher will mention this a little bit more, but he was one of the first people to really fuse jazz and classical and bring them together. So you'll hear a lot of jazz influence, but it's all notated. We're not improvising anything. In 1923, Schulhoff returned to Prague. He thought of himself as kind of a middleman between Germany and Czechoslovakia, but unfortunately, neither side really claimed him or accepted him. Things got even worse when his father lost their fortune. Universal Editions dissolved his publishing contract because he was too difficult to work with. His mother died. His wife got very ill. She died and left him. He, at the same time, this will put him in a certain light, but people are people, right? He was having an affair with a student. They later remarried after he and his wife got divorced and she left, and he became active as a communist at this time as well. When the German occupation of Czechoslovakia began in 1938, Schulhoff began the process of trying to emigrate to Great Britain, France, or the US. He soon realized that it would be too difficult and applied for Soviet citizenship, which he received in April 1941. On June 13th, 1941, he picked up visas for himself and his family. But the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union on June 22nd, making it impossible for them to make the trip. He was arrested on June 23rd. Schulhoff's father, Gustav, was deported to and died in Theresienstadt, which you'll hear more about in the second half. However, Erwin was arrested for being a Soviet citizen, not for being Jewish, and was sent to Würzburg concentration camp in Bavaria, where he died of tuberculosis 2 months later. Amanda and I will perform 3 songs of his, and I will introduce my dear friend and amazing colleague, Amanda DeMaris, to tell you a little bit about those 3 songs.
Thanks, Hannah. Good morning. It's nice to be here with you all. Hannah and I will be performing 3 delightful songs by Schulhoff, which he wrote when he was just 17 years old. They are published in 1911. They are 3 songs of children. And his leader, he wrote 89 in total, 89 songs as well as 2 vocal duets. And his music has influences of Impressionism and late Romanticism. The poetry that he chose to set was very common at the time, things that he could have found in an anthology. And his settings are very direct and syllabic. The first song, Einem Kind, or a child, describes looking over a young child in a crib and wishing blessings upon them. The second song, Geheimnis, or Secret, is a mischievous song. It seems to be through the eyes of a child who has just this wonderful secret that they would love to share, but best not. And the final song, Juli, or July, describes just a beautiful, bountiful scene in July, completely idyllic, with the fields full of things soon to be harvested, just setting a perfect scene for the musings of young people. I hope you enjoy Hannah and I performing these 3 songs of children by Schulhoff.
Mitchell, there's 1 slide for each movement. Thank you.
wenn der Himmelsflug ist ein Suchen weit umher, ob nicht doch ein Sternlein wär, wo aus eitel Glanz und Licht Liebe sich ein Glücksgrad prägt, das sie geflügelt herniederträgt und dir aufs weiße Deckchen legt. Ich trag ein glückselig Geheimnis mit mir herum. Ich möcht's allen Leuten vertrauen und bleib doch stumm. Ach, jubeln möcht ich und singen, von früh bis spät, und rege nur heimlich die Lippen wie zum Gebet.
It's like July. It's like July at a farm.
Klingt im Wind ein Wiegenlied, Sonne warm herniedersieht. Seine Ehren senkt das Korn, rote Beere schwillt am Dorn. Scher von Segen ist die Flur. Junge Frau, was sinnst du nur?
In 1929, Schulhoff, I'm only speaking for about 30 more seconds, and then, but yes. In 1929, Schulhoff wrote a Hut Sonata for piano. Unfortunately, that manuscript is lost, but we do have his Hut Sonata for saxophone, which he wrote a year later. And I'll introduce my husband and colleague, Christopher, to speak about that.
In the early 1800s, the orchestra was the biggest it was going to get. It was evolving into this very large thing. Low brass were being added, tubas were added. The sound of it was just getting huge. So throughout the orchestra's time, it just kept getting larger and louder and more colorful. And finally somebody said, hey, when it gets really loud, I can't even hear the woodwinds. So then Adolph Sax says, I can fix that. So Adolph Sax developed this thing specifically to be loud. So that's why we exist, to have a louder woodwind. Isn't that great? Yeah. So if you're in the front row, no, seriously, it was invented to actually have the technical facility of a woodwind, but the projection of a brass instrument. That's why it is categorized as a woodwind. We do have a reed, but it is a brass materialed instrument in general. This one's actually gold-plated, but yeah, they're generally brass. So it was created to be a part of the orchestra. This instrument was part of the orchestra in its conception. That was decades, almost 100 years before there was anything we call jazz. But what do you identify this instrument with? Jazz, right? It is not only a part of our history that we adore, but it's a part of the history we can't even shake. So if you want to do anything that's flat out classical, many composers say, hey, yeah, I'm writing for saxophone. So even if they're the most classical composer in history, they will say, this is my opportunity to write something jazzy. So we love that. We love when any composers will write for us, period. We eat up the repertoire because we don't have things from Bach because we're too young. This instrument was not around when Bach was around, when he was composing. And we all know he's not composing any longer. He's decomposing. All right, so, sorry. But yeah, so Schulhoff, as she pointed out, was a lover of going out dancing at night. He loved hitting the clubs. And the dance bands back then frequently were centered around the saxophone. So this is what he thought of, and he thought, I'm going to write a piece that involves saxophone. So of course he's thinking in his head that it's going to be jazzy. So he wrote this thing that if you put this on and you're doing the dishes and walking around the house and doing your thing, you're just going to listen to it and think, oh, this is kind of jazzy. This is jazz. If you listen carefully to it, it is not. It is very, very orchestrated. Even the parts, if you think about jazz musicians, sometimes one of the beautiful things about jazz is the intended lack of coordination. So people can be playing the same melody at the same time and actually playing it with slightly different rhythms, so it doesn't line up perfectly, and that's part of the flavor. He actually tells me in a couple of spots here to actually play it slow and behind the piano. He actually tells me to do things that make it sound, in his head, that'll make it sound more like the jazz club things that he heard at night. So it's really interesting, and it's very sophisticated. And if I'm not careful, because of some of the little tricks he throws in, I'll actually get thrown off, so I have to remember to count. But, but it's a really interesting piece, and it's very well written, it's very well crafted, and we hope you enjoy Schulhoff's Hot Sonata.
Can you comment on the poster?
On the poster?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you want to do that? Or you want? Well, I know some of it. What do you associate this with? Jazz, basically, right? What was jazz associated with? Black people, right? So jazz and black people, two things that the Nazis were just flat out against, right? Does that answer the question? Yeah. It was, so, do you have more?
All I was going to add is that the Nazis did actually outlaw specific composers, specific types of music, the saxophone, jazz, composers who were writing using those instruments or in that style. So there's a whole realm of music that has a rebirth that the Nazis kind of tried to do away with. Sorry.
Interesting note. From what I understand, the Nazis had the saxophonists so scared that the woodwind players, saxophone and clarinets, same person a lot of times, and they would bury the saxophone in their backyard and say, no, I don't own a saxophone. They were so scared to have saxophones around. But Hitler would have big bands with saxophones at his dance parties. So he would make everybody else scared to do that, but then he did it himself because he wanted the music. So, classy guy.
We can move to the next slide. Thank you, Mitchell. The last work we will perform for you today is called I Never Saw Another Butterfly by Ellwood Derr. This suite is based on drawings and poems done by children in Degenerate, a concentration camp. These children were later deported to Auschwitz and killed there. I actually couldn't find much information about Ellwood Derr, the composer. He studied at the Eastman School of Music in New York, spent 2 years of national service in Nuremberg, Germany. He enrolled at the University of Illinois for graduate school, but left to go study with Karl Orff in Munich. He joined the faculty at University of Michigan, where he had my lovely husband in one of his classes, and he taught there until 2007. He passed away on his 76th birthday, May 7th, 2008. From what I could find, I don't believe he was Jewish. He just, from his time spent in Germany, he had discovered these paintings and poems and set them to some very poignant music. I'll use that word. Degenerate in Czech, or Theresienstadt in German, was the Nazis' propaganda camp. Here they brought the artists, musicians, philosophers, teachers, doctors, who worked in horrid conditions during the day and at night created art. The art they made was shown to UN visitors as a sign that everyone was being treated humanely and that things were fine. One resident, Friedel Dicker Brandeis, taught art classes to the residents. To the children, she told stories and asked them to draw pictures. One survivor said of her, "I remember Mrs. Brandeis as a tender, highly intelligent woman who managed for some hours every week to create a fairy world for us in Degenerate, a world that made us forget all the surrounding hardships, which we were not spared despite our early age." Dicker Brandeis was deported to Auschwitz on October 6th, 1944, and later died in Birkenau. I brought with me the collection of the poems and drawings that were discovered in Degenerate, if anyone wants to look at that afterwards. This is readily available. This is a new edition with a foreword, well, not new, but a newer edition with a foreword by Chaim Potok. And the selections that we're performing, there will be a slide with the drawing and the poem that you can see. You can see here the names, if you can read it, the names, the birth dates, the dates they were deported, and their death dates there. There are 5 poems that we will perform. In the 4th one, I was reading some of the footnotes that Derr wrote in the score, and in the 4th one, it gets very loud. You will hear, how would you describe that section?
Cacophony.
Yeah, cacophony is a great word. And Amanda will be, you're in Sprechstimme there, yes? Yes, she's speak singing. And Christopher and I are playing together. And this melody that we're outlining, I'm playing cluster chords, which basically means I'm just mashing down on the piano, but in a direction. So this melody that we're playing is actually kind of quotes the German national anthem, Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles, Germany, Germany, overall. Did you want to play that so they can listen for that in the 4th? So you'll hear that in movement 4, which is titled Fear. Excuse me. Chaim Potok closes the foreword of this book with the following statistics. The statistics of Theresienstadt, cold and numbing, each digit a human being. As of April 20th, 1945, there arrived from Germany, Holland, Denmark, Poland, Luxembourg, Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and a few other places, a little over 141,000 Jews. 33,456 died in the ghetto. 88,202 were transported to the death camps in the East. On May 9th, 1945, Liberation Day, there remained in Theresienstadt a total of 16,832 Jews. Of the 15,000 children deported from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz, 100 survived, none under the age of 14. The preface to this book closes, "Through their artistic expressions, the voices of these children, each one unique and individual, reach us across the abyss of the greatest crime in human history, allow us to touch them, and restore our own humanity in doing so." Thank you so much for coming today. We'd like to observe a moment of silence when we finish to remember and honor all of those who've been killed by genocide. And again, Mitchell, there's a slide for each movement, and then there's a closing slide. Thank you.
That bit of filth in dirty walls and all around barbed wire, and 30,000 souls who sleep, who once will wake and once will see their own blood spilled. Child, 3 years ago, that child who longed for other worlds, but now I am no more a child, for I have learned to hate. I am a grown-up person now. That I'll wake up a child again and start to laugh and play somewhere far away out there. Childhood sweetly sleeps along that path among the trees, there o'er that house which was once my pride and joy. There my mother gave me birth into this world, so I could weep, 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 weep.
7 weeks I've lived in here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I have found my people here. The dandelions have befriended me, and the white chestnut candles in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in here. In the ghetto. In Terezin, in the so-called park, a queer old grandad sits somewhere there. In the so-called park, he wears a beard down to his lap, and on his head a little cap. In Terezin, in the so-called park, hard crusts he crumbles in his gums. He's only got one single tooth, my poor old man with raking gums. There's no soft roll or lentil soup for you, my poor old gray beard. Today, the ghetto knows a different fear. Close in its grip, death wields an icy scythe. An evil sickness spreads a terror in its wake. The victims, its shadow weep, 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 and writhe. Today, a father's heartbeat tells his fright, and mothers bend their heads in their hands. Now children choke and die with typhus here. No, no, oh God, they want to live. That's what enough is meant to be. We want to have a better world. We want to work.